Welcome back to our couch series. I'm here with Addison, and this month we had a lot of different topics to talk about. It's Self-Esteem Awareness Month, Awareness Week.
It's International Self-esteem Awareness Month.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Children Mental Health Week.
Yep, Children's Mental Health Awareness Week.
And then there's the eating disorders.
Yep, towards the end of the month.
Towards the end of the month. So I think what we decided is that we're going to push eating disorders for next month and talk today about children's mental health and self-esteem. And they're both quite interlinked.
They are, I think, very interlinked. I think, firstly, it's, I think, amazing that children have a part of the month, if not a part of the year, that's dedicated to helping adults and young people to raise awareness about children's mental health, because it's, let's face it, it's such a crucial topic. And
yes.
With so many young people now struggling with different things, navigating life, perhaps, you know, more people are reaching out as less of a stigma is attached to mental health. More and more young people are experiencing challenges and difficulties.
Exactly, but I think it's also, we've spoken about that before, I don't know if it was off camera, it is much more stressful to be a child these days than it was in our days.
I think, I mean, I want to say yes.
Don't you think, with all of the social media and the exposure and the judgment and the cyberbullying and all of that, that's a lot. And the expectations, like you're exposed to so much, so you expect from yourself a lot more than what we expected from ourselves, just because we were exposed to so much less.
Times have definitely changed.
Yes,
and in hindsight, when we can look back, we can say, yes, there are huge comparisons. And I think life now is, and it was before as well, but life is certainly challenging and distressing now. And I think just that there's a part of the year that's dedicated for all of the schools, like many schools are inviting me in to do talks towards the end of this month and the beginning of March, to kind of highlight mental health amongst children and to talk about really pertinent topics that they're going through at the moment. And I think it's amazing, really good.
No, I think it's important because, as you said a number of times, and I think that's obviously very true, if you address any mental health issue at a younger age, so much easier to kind of work through it than have it stay till you're an adult, and then it becomes so much more entrenched and much harder to clients. My clients tend to be a lot more long-term than yours.
They do. Maybe because of the different model as well that we work to. But I do think that that it's a really important point that you raise about you know, young people and what they need and the things that they go through, and catching it early being really important. I think we mentioned before that 50% of all mental health concerns are triggered off in young people before the age of 14. Yeah. And if not addressed, the mental health concerns, sometimes we see they can kind of naturally be worked through on their own or with a young person giving themselves some targeted support. But generally speaking, they don't go away so much. They might hide, they might kind of lay dormant, but then later on, maybe you, I mean, I know that we've spoken about it many times, but lots of adults that you kind of spoke to me about, we've had supervision for, did experience trauma or difficulties in childhood, and it's still playing out in their life.
It's still playing out because also the problem is that when it's not addressed immediately and when it's not, when there's no attention given to it, they don't really learn the tools to deal with any kind of trauma or any kind of stress in life. And life is stressful. I mean, growing up in this time or other times, life is stressful and it's always going to throw things at you. So if you don't have the tools to deal with it, it becomes even more difficult. And as they grow older, it's just more things keep happening, and then the dysfunction continues and becomes kind of a style of life.
Yeah, it does. I think now for young people, I think schools do a lot more, and counsellors do a lot more, not only in raising awareness about mental health, but they run groups at school. Obviously the counsellor, you know, allocates time for the young people to come and drop by or have scheduled sessions. So I think a lot more is being done to support young people. But I still see that, you know, compared to kind of 13, 14 years ago when I started, it's the same mental health concerns that are still coming up now. Separation anxiety, lots and lots of social anxiety concerns, panic attacks, OCD, generalized anxiety, health anxiety. I saw 13, 14 years ago, and I still see now very much to the same degree. I think we're doing a lot more, but the nature of life is that mental health or negative, kind of unhelpful mental health creeps in. And across the world, we see the same conditions, albeit in different environments.
Why do you think you're seeing more anxiety than you see depression?
I don't know if it's partly because of where we are in the UAE, in terms of the lifestyle here. I think, you know, with every part of the world, there are a different variety of people. Maybe because Dubai is very international, it is affluent. There are some very successful and kind of executive level people working here that have expectations of what life should be like. I think that can create competition not only amongst parents, but then the children have competition with other kind of their peers within other families. I think whilst I love Dubai, I think it's a place where people perhaps do like to show off a little bit more than other parts of the world. Like they like to show what they have.
I find it to be an extremely high achieving city.
Yeah, okay. I think that's a really fair reflection.
Yeah.
And with that, of course, there will be an influx of money. People will spend more, they have more luxurious goods, these types of things. I'm not saying that that's a bad thing for young people, but I think, I mean, if you were to just look at the schooling here, apart from if you are a Middle Eastern local, everything is private. So the expectations will be that the schools perform at a higher level than they would do government schools, like back in the UK. Yeah. I think that puts a lot of pressure on young people. You know, a lot of the time when people talk to me about social anxiety, they think it's just about confidence. And it's so not. It's, you know, there's some really key important factors in there. It's not just about, okay, can I talk to people? That's not just social anxiety. It's a big umbrella that it covers. Fears of humiliation, embarrassment, judgment, and rejection are often the four kind of things that would encompass social anxiety. So whether or not you can talk in front of a big group and do a presentation, you could still have social anxiety if you still have an underlying fear or concern about what people think of you. Doesn't mean you can't perform, it just means that there is a part of you that's uneasy about, you know, how people view you. And I think with that in mind, social anxiety being such a big topic and having lots of potential different symptoms, I think lots of people in Dubai experience those symptoms because the schooling is really difficult and there's expectation from teachers. I hear it
from parents all the time.
Parents, you know, I think parents, a lot of parents that I speak to do not intentionally try to apply pressure to do well or get good grades. But for one reason or another, the young person still experiences it, that pressure.
A lot of the parents that I meet with, they speak about the same thing. They experience pressure and that their children are experiencing pressure and not necessarily that they're applying it.
No, a lot of parents tell me this and we take on board that this is what must be happening. So a lot of the time it is the young person creating their own competitive streak with their peers, you know, in terms of showcasing or talking about what grades they've got, or how well they've done on an exam.
Or even what kind of activities they're involved in and after school activities.
The A team, the B team. You know, am I getting medals? Am I coming first in swimming? This all creates an intrinsic level of kind of competition. And fear as well, it can do. So I think in terms of anxiety and social anxiety in particular, it's, you know, a lot of the system in which we're in, the private schooling, the affluent parents, but also the young person and how they kind of gauge themselves against others. Probably accounts, I would imagine, for quite a high proportion of why I see so much social anxiety.
How does all of that link to self-esteem?
So I tend to think of self-esteem a little bit like self-worth, the way we view ourselves. So if we have positive self-esteem, we may present more positively across the board in different situations. But likewise, if we think good of ourselves, generally speaking, like within our core, we will probably perform more positively as well. So I think self-esteem and self-worth are quite interrelated.
Yes, they are.
And I think if a young person is experiencing anxiety or any kind of mental health concern, it's quite likely that their self-esteem will be a little bit reduced compared to peers who aren't experiencing mental health concerns. And that's largely because of anxiety or any other mental health concern, the impact that has on the way that we think. You know, if I have anxiety or panic attacks, to a degree I must believe that I can't cope somehow. If I hold a belief that I can't cope or I can't do certain things because of the anxiety, my self-esteem can't be amazing. It has to be somewhat affected by the beliefs of my own limitations. So what I try and do with people is to work interchangeably with them both. So to create a dialogue for improving self-worth. So self-talk. I often, in one of the first sessions I do with young people, I ask them to write down 10 things they believe they're good at, or they like about themselves.
I do that with adults.
Yeah?
You'd be surprised how they get to one, two, and then they just stop.
I was just about to say that.
Yeah.
It's a lot of, I mean, maybe it's because we put them on the spot as well.
Yeah.
And sometimes it takes some thinking time. But a lot of the time, young people maybe get to 3 or 4, and then they're a little bit at a loss. It's like, well, I don't know what else I'm good at.
But you know what I find very interesting, and I just do it for them to see how self-critical they are, is give me 10 things that you don't like about yourself. And the list will go till 20 and they don't have a problem. They don't stop, it just goes on and on. And it's just an illustration. I do that sometimes as an illustration of, you see how you devalue yourself.
Yep.
And this is self-esteem.
Yeah.
Exactly what you're talking about. Self-esteem, self-worth, self-appraisal, all of these things.
Yeah.
So one of the key things I do is to offset the negativity with the positivity.
Exactly.
Because a lot of the times people, if there are things that they think negatively about, they'll gravitate towards them. But I just try to help guide them in seeing that, well, not everything is negative. And why not give a little bit more focus and attention on the positive? That would be one thing. So the self-talk and the kind of re-evaluation of how they view themselves. The other key part of self-esteem and self-worth is, what I find within the CBT model is that people that have lower self-esteem or lower self-worth tend to avoid more things.
Yeah.
So things that may be challenging, they would tend to not try or attempt as much of the time. So one of the key things I do is try to encourage them to engage in activities that they do find difficult, not too difficult, but somewhat difficult, or that brings about anxiety. Situations in which they struggle. And I suppose this more so relates to anxiety-based concerns, where there is a fear attached to doing something. Because one of the quickest ways I've found to help a young person boost their self-esteem is to challenge themselves to do something that makes them uncomfortable, and to see, having done it, was it as catastrophic as I thought it would be? If it wasn't, then the motivation to do it again and to keep on pushing themselves becomes more transparent. It's there. So it's very much about the behavioural element of pushing yourself to do more things and challenging yourself, as well as spending more time focusing on exploring the evidence for all the good things or positive things about you. The self-talk, the self-worth, the self-esteem. So that's the two main things I do with young people around self-esteem and worth.
How do you help parents raise their children's self-esteem?
So sometimes that will involve specific parenting work. So by that I mean the nature of the relationship that the parent holds with the young person. So some parents, without intent, can be quite critical.
Yes.
So I help them not to be less critical as such, but to rephrase the way they word things. You know, so rather than saying, what grade did you get for an exam, if it's been a test that day, I might encourage them to say, you know, do you think your effort paid off? So a complete rephrase. It's not focusing on the grade, it's focusing on the effort or the work that was applied to it. Likewise, giving more praise, but valid praise. I often tell parents it almost becomes a bit redundant and unhelpful if you praise your child for absolutely everything, because it loses its power and its sense of meaning. But it's absolutely fine to praise 20 times a day if there are things that are praiseworthy for. And you can praise for anything. You really can. If you as a parent believe that, that praising a child for making their bed is praiseworthy, absolutely fine. As long as, I always tell parents, reflect on the effort that's put into something rather than the result. Because it can be a little bit counterproductive for anxiety to focus on results. You know, okay, did you get straight A's this year compared to did you put in the effort and try your best? It's such a different way of rephrasing things. And you don't really want kids to purely or solely focus on the grade that they get. That doesn't teach them how to apply themselves and to reward themselves with the effort that they've put in.
You know what I see a lot in adults that links a lot to self-esteem, and what you're saying is that everyone is always looking for that external validation. The grades, the appraisal at the end of the year for work, the bonus, something external, the compliment from others, something external to tell me I am good, because I'm not able to say I am good on my own, because I'm not able to see that. And that has to do with the type of praise you get, the praise that's focused on external results rather than the effort that you've made, which is exactly right. And you see that a lot. I mean, at least I saw that when I was in school. There are subjects that I struggled with, like everyone, and there are subjects that I struggled with, and there are subjects. And my parents were not so focused on grades, but just seeing that you've done the effort, the end result is not necessarily important, because some subjects it's how our brains work. You cannot be good at everything. So that idea of having straight A's is not really realistic.
And I mean, so what I say to parents is, look, it's still okay to tell your child well done if they get straight A's.
Yeah, of course.
It's a great achievement. But try to, more of the time, put a little bit more focus on the effort that they've applied, the amount of time that they put into things, because ultimately the child will experience it as being more rewarding, like you say. Rather than the grade, it's about the whole process. And if you can teach a child and a young person to be praiseworthy of their effort, and they get more validation and reward from the effort, well, that will be transferable across life. They'll learn that effort pays off, rather than, okay, if I study really hard, I'll get straight A's. It's just a different mindset for the future as well.
And rather than focusing on results, then focusing on what actually is being done. So sometimes, and I see that with adult clients all the time, where they've done a lot of work, they've really worked hard, but there was no results, because in this kind of life, there's a lot of elements that's out of your control. And then they start beating themselves up and feeling bad and feeling defeated and feeling like and you'll hear it, I'm a loser, I don't do well enough, and the negative self-talk is so intense, just because the result was not, even though the effort was outstanding.
So these are some of the things I really encourage parents: praise, but try to praise more of the effort than the results. Spend more time with your children. Make more one-to-one time. Make sure that you are gently encouraging them to try new things and to do new things. But I think more so for young people, self-esteem is about, you know, making sure that you give yourself time. I often say to young people each week, where you do reflect on your achievements of the week, or the things that have gone well, the things that you feel like you have done well. Because it's that constant reflection, thinking back over the things that you feel like you've achieved or accomplished something with, that will keep your self-esteem, if not balanced, positive. It would just keep it kind of in the more positive zone. So it's just a lot about reflection, self-talk, pushing yourself to do things, self-praise, self-reward, and just making sure that you're trying to engage in things that push you every now and again.
And maybe that's the same for adults. That's the same thing that I would say to adults. But what I would add is that your worth, who you are, is not valued by what you do. So a lot of people, you see them, they find their worth with, they associate their worth with their jobs, or they associate with their role as a parent, for example. So if a mother is struggling with her children, or is having a child who's struggling, then her own self-esteem and self-worth goes down. Same thing at work. And trying to separate your worth and who you are as a person, because self-esteem and self-worth, as you said, are interlinked. Trying to separate that from what you're doing. And it starts with the very simple thing, because a lot of times people identify themselves. If you ask people, what do you do? I'm a marketeer, or I'm a psychologist. And I've really stopped doing that. I work as a psychologist. It's not my identity. That's what I do.
Yeah, that's really important.
Yeah. And it's a good way to start separating yourself and your identity from what you do or your role. And it's a good way to start building your self-esteem based on who you are.
It's really valuable. I like that.
Than what you do.
Yeah. Excellent.
Yeah. Any last advice?
I don't think so. I hope it wasn't too long for you guys, and I hope you found it useful and helpful. We'll be back.
We'll be back next month talking about eating disorders. That's going to be intense. But it's a topic close to both our hearts, so I think that's exciting. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel and our podcast channel, and let us know in the comments what topics you'd like to see us discuss more. Have a nice day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.